Okay, so there's a video that was just made today, and it's by a guy called Toma Tales. The name of the video is called A German Speaks on Life Without African Americans. And in this video, he talks about how um, he has lived here in America for about 10 years, I believe. He's lived in 3 different states: Tennessee, California, and I think Florida was another state. And he talks about how his experiences living in these 3 states, he had apparently he was going to school with a large amount of African American teenagers. And he talks about how when he was, younger and attending school, how violent African Americans were and are, and how he witnessed a fight in a cafeteria amongst 2 young African American teenage girls, and that these girls were, huge and out of shape, and how they got into this fight and they were fighting like adults, real rough. And, a teacher apparently tried to step into the fight and break it up, and they started beating on the teacher. And he talks about how violent the fight was, and first one thing after another. And he's basically saying that all the other races that he has been around are pleasant. He talks about how the Mexicans are hardworking people, and how the Middle Easterners are okay, and how, white people are fine, but when it comes to black people, we're violent, we're rude, we're disrespectful, and it has a lot. And he's basically saying it's because of our culture, okay? And I would like to make a comment about that, because, uh, much of our culture here in America has vastly been shaped by our government. Okay. This culture that we have, which is really based off of our music, off of hip hop, after, it's based after hip hop culture. Okay. There's a dress code that kind of comes with it, a language that's kind of spoken. Um, if you live in certain neighborhoods, or, we do have our own little ghetto culture, okay? Uh, and here's my take on this, okay? This culture that, this hip hop culture that America has adopted, uh, it's really kind of based off of the music industry, okay? The music industry has an awful lot to do with hip hop culture. I am middle aged. I grew up here in the United States. I am an African American myself. And when I was in school, the culture here in the United States was based off of rock and roll back during that time. Okay. And it was just as ghetto, just as violent, just as demonic as the hip hop culture we have today. Okay. Back when I was in high school, we had, there wasn't, the hip hop culture did not really exist because back during that time frame, the music that was listened to in the African American community was called soul music back during that time frame. I'm a Generation Xer. I come from Generation X. Back in those days, our music stayed within our neighborhoods, within our boundaries. Okay. And when rap music came into the picture, and that was right around in the 80s, probably mid to late 80s, there was this rap music called gangster rap that started making its way into the music industry, okay, based off of rappers talking about their life growing up in the hood, living in California and, in New York and those type places. And our culture was mostly kept amongst black people. Okay. So when I was in school, when I was in high school, white people mostly listened to the music from their own community, which at that time, Kiss was very popular, Ozzy Osbourne, Queen, God, there's a ton of them. Let's see, just hard rock was very in style back during those days. I can't even remember. There were tons of hard rock bands that were out at that time. I can't possibly go through all the names of the bands that were a part of the white culture back in the 80s and the 90s, okay? But they listened to a lot of hard rock, they listened to classic rock, and so they had their own music. They mostly listened to their own music. And the African Americans had their own music, and we kept our music within our community. Okay, it wasn't until the 2000 era came about when the millennials came into the picture, and they started to take the hip hop culture and start spreading it off into other races. Okay. And what I mean by that is our music became available on local radio stations, whereas before our music was mostly played on radio stations that catered to our own community. Okay, we had black DJs, what you called black DJs back during that time frame, and the music that was played was only aired in certain demographic areas. Okay, but then when the millennials came into the picture, the music industry started to take the music out of the black community and started to disperse our hip hop culture to all races of people, and this is where the problem started. Okay, because it started with Prince, it started with Michael Jackson. Um, you know, it went from soul music to hip hop music, and all these other cultures started listening to hip hop music that kind of made its way into all races and backgrounds of people rather than just the African American community. So when that started happening, rock started to die out after a while. Rap music started coming in real heavily by the 2000 era, and our music videos went from black men singing to black women to black men singing to all races of women. Okay? And when that started happening, it started when black men started to put all these other races into our music videos. This gave all these other women access to our music, and so they started listening to our music. Non-black men and women started to listen to R&B music more and more because the music industry started to cater out our music to all races of people rather than just the black community. Okay. First off, I would like to say this. Black people, we didn't ask the music industry to do that. We didn't ask the music industry to take our music out of our community and start catering it to Hispanic people and Asians and whites and Middle Eastern people. We didn't ask the music industry to do that. The music industry figured that instead of leaving our music in our community, they figured, well, you know what? If we start catering to white people and Hispanic people, we can make a whole lot more money. So they started including white women and Hispanic women into our videos, whereas before it was just black men making music videos, singing to and caressing the women from their own communities. And so when the music industry started to cater our music to the entire world, they started putting your women into our videos. Okay. Black women didn't ask for that. We didn't want that in our community. That was a huge slap in the face. None of us really liked it. Because, you know, our cultural music really was supposed to be for our people. But because the music industry decided they could make more money by catering our music out to all races of people, well, then the rap artists started to put all these non-black women into their videos as video vixens, and our music was dispersed out to all races of people instead of just the black community. And when that happened, when all these other women started listening to our rap music, and they started seeing black men singing love songs to women who looked like them, then they started to take an interest in that. And then that's when they started coming into our community, going after our men. Okay. And black women didn't ask for that. We didn't ask the music industry to do that. We didn't ask our men to bring in all these other races of women into our music videos and to start singing their songs to women of all races. We didn't ask for that. This was the music industry, and black men agreed to do it because it was bringing in more money. Because white men, when they were singing their rock music, when they came out with rock, they were mostly catering their music to the white community. Okay. And you had a handful of white Spaniards that also got into classic rock and hard rock, and they would start going to the concerts because white men catered to pretty much, white people that mostly listened to their music. They didn't really start putting black women into any of their videos. Okay. They kept their videos white. It was the black community that got asked to start putting all these women from these other races into our videos and to start dispersing our music out to all races of people. White men, when they were making their rock songs, they didn't start putting black women and Hispanic women into none of their videos. So see, white people, the music industry, as far as white people, kept their shit white. Okay. But when it came to black people, the excuse was, well, if we let all races of people in on your cultural music, you guys can make a whole lot more money. And they did, because everybody liked gangster rap. Everybody liked R&B. Black men and women just pretty much took over the music field. And our music pretty much sounded a whole lot better than these other genres of music. People liked to see, white women and Hispanic women liked to see black men singing to them in their love songs and all that carrying on that they did to bring these other races into our culture, to start listening to our cultural music. And then after a while, after our music was dispersed out to all races of people, then these other races started wanting to adopt our language called Ebonics that we speak in our communities. They wanted to start speaking like us. They started wanting to dress like us. And white and Hispanic women started wanting to date all of our men and all that kind of carrying on. Black women didn't ask for none of that. I want to make that shit real clear. Okay. We didn't ask for none of that. We didn't want that. Okay. But the music industry brought all that shit into our culture. Okay. And when black men saw that it was going to make them rich, well, then they didn't, have anything against it. I mean, if it's going to bring in more money, Well, then sure, let them come in and make black men rich by listening to their rap songs and their cultural music. But see, it started going too far when, you know, white women started wanting to cosplay black women by trying to talk like us and trying to basically become us. They started trying to date, they started listening to our music, and then coming to our concerts and hitting on black men and having all these kids with them. And all this shit started with the music industry. This is how it all started. I know how it all went down because I was living back during that time frame. I seen how it all went down. And everybody in Generation X can agree with what I'm saying. If the music industry had not taken our music and dispersed it out to all these other races, then you guys wouldn't have a thing to this very day to do with us. You would have still been listening to your rock music, going to your rock concerts. White women would have been fooling around with white men, and we would have had our shit to ourselves. Okay? This was not the call of black people. This was the call by the music industry. They started telling black men, they started telling our black male rappers what to say in their rap songs. They started telling them what to rap about. They started basically telling them in so many words, which is what they're still doing today. We'll sign you up. We'll turn you into a multimillionaire. But we have to tell you what you can and cannot sing about. We get to design the videos. We get pretty much ownership of you. Okay? So the music industry has a lot to do with why white America and Latin America, how they got, a hold of black culture in the first place. It all goes back to the music industry. Okay. And, and it all goes back to money. Okay. Because rap music was a big thing, and it still is a big thing. It is still our music and our culture is still to this very day being dispersed out to all races of people. Again, we didn't ask for that. Black men are not going to just cater to the black community when they can make multi-millions of dollars catering to all races. So naturally, they're going to agree to take their cultural music and share it with everybody, but the black community in general didn't want that. We didn't want our cultural music dispersed out for everybody. We didn't want our men putting these other women into our music videos and singing them love songs, in videos that should have been where there should have been black women in those videos. Hell, there were no black women in rock videos that were put out by white guys. You didn't see a bunch of white men putting black women in their rock videos. But the music industry only took an interest in the black community for some reason. And so when they did that, when Purple Rain was made and when Michael Jackson started singing songs like It's Black or White, and how color didn't matter and all that type of carrying on, all that type of stuff is what caused these other races to start coming in listening to our cultural music. And again, the black community never asked for none of that, especially black women. We didn't ask these other races to start cosplaying black women. We didn't ask them to come into our communities and start dating our men and to start talking like us and dressing like us. And we didn't ask for none of that. So, this German guy that talks about how black people are so violent and we're so ghetto and we're so uncivilized and we're, all this negative stuff. I would like to ask him, have you ever been to places like Colorado, and have you seen some of the black neighborhoods in Denver that are upper middle class? Have you ever been to places like Georgia, and have you ever seen some of the upper middle class neighborhoods out there? I mean, you talk about Florida, Tennessee, and California. Well, what parts did you live in, and were you living in predominantly black areas? Okay, what demographic areas were you living in where it sounds to be like you were living in the ghettos, okay? But you haven't seen any of the upper middle class neighborhoods in Atlanta where highly educated people live in totally affluent, nice neighborhoods in Maryland, in Washington, in Colorado. There's different parts of the United States that have very affluent neighborhoods where highly educated black people live in. And so where did your parents have you living? And then he talks about how he was in this cafeteria and how he saw this fight break out between two black girls, and it was a very violent fight. Okay, I mentioned that earlier. Well, I went to an all-white school. I'm a black female. Okay, I went to an all-white school in an upper middle class white neighborhood, and I saw 2 or 3 fights throughout my high school years with white males. Okay, white teenage males. One fight I will never forget was between 2 guys. I must have been in 11th grade at the time. They got into this very, very violent fight out in the middle of the hall. And it was very rough and violent. And one of the guys took a padlock and struck the other guy in his face and ripped his nose almost off of his face with that padlock. There was blood everywhere. That was one of the most violent fights I've ever seen, and it was between 2 white guys. Okay, so does that give me the right to say that all white men in America? I saw 2 white guys fighting in a hallway in an upper middle class neighborhood. One white guy hit the other one in the face and broke his nose, and cut his nose almost off with a padlock. Blood was everywhere. It was a very violent, bloody scene. So now do I get to judge all white males because of that very bloody, very violent incident that happened when I was in the 11th grade? Do I get to pass judgment on all white males? Okay, what about all the shootings that have taken place here in America, mostly with young white males? It's mostly white males out here going to the malls, churches, high schools, elementary schools, nightclubs, shooting up the place because of some political issue they didn't agree with. If they can't have their way, if they can't date the kind of girls they want to date, then you'll just go and get a rifle and shoot up the whole high school. You know, more white young males have went in and shot up all these high schools. That's more violent than any other race in the United States combined. It's more violent than the blacks, the Hispanics, and the Arabs and the Asians put together. All the shootings that young white males have done, taking out very innocent young people. There's been shootings almost daily here in the United States, mostly by young white males. So see, you sit here and you want to make black people look so bad by talking about these two young girls that got into a fight into a cafeteria and they beat up one of the men who tried to break up the fight. I mean, what about all these white males that have taken rifles up to high schools and have taken entire people out, like 6 and 7 and 8, 3 people here, 2 people there, 8 people here. It's almost a daily, weekly thing, and it's mostly white males doing this type of shit. So, you know, I mean, I just kind of think that, you know, before you make these videos, you really need to think about the stuff that you're saying, because no other race has taken a rifle into high schools and elementary schools and churches and just went off on innocent people and just took them out like like a lot of these young white males have done. So nobody in the United States is more violent than white males. You don't hear of black males doing that. You don't hear of black females loading up rifles, going up to high schools and taking out as many people as they can see. You just don't hear about it. It's white males doing this shit. Nobody else is that violent and that hateful and that conniving to do that type of shit. How do you go to a church and sit there and pray with a group full of people that you don't know? You just walk into a church, they invite you in, they're very nice to you, they're warm, they're inviting, they're loving. You sit there and you pray with them, and then in 30 minutes later you shoot up half the church. These are all young white males doing this shit, going into gay nightclubs and shooting people all in the gay bars, and going to the synagogues and shooting up the synagogues, and Lord, it goes on and on and on. Nobody is more violent than white males. So for you to sit up here and to say that African Americans are the most uncivilized, violent people here in America, you're very wrong. You need to look into what's going on here in the United States every single day. It's guys that look just like you walking into high schools, shooting innocent people almost on a daily basis. White-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde and red-headed guys that look just like you. Okay, it's not black females doing this. It's not black males doing this. It's not Latino males doing this. It's guys that look just like you. Look at what happened to Charlie Kirk. Again, guys that look just like you doing that type of stuff. Did you see the video where he practically, I mean, I don't even want to talk about it, okay? But it was very, very violent and very bloody. Again, people that look like you are out here doing that type of stuff. So before you get online making these videos trying to make African Americans the problem of America, please check yourself. Sweep up the dirt around your own front door before you go pointing fingers at everybody else, okay? You white males are very frightening. I'm almost nervous to go anywhere and a young white male walks into the room. It's frightening because you don't know if they're going to take out a rifle or if they're going to take out a knife and start stabbing everybody. And, you know, you're just very, very violent. Okay. And so, you know, this goes back to who's raising you. You know, I mean, who's teaching you to have all this hate? So this, you know, I think I've said enough. I think I have pretty much made my point very clear. Once again, and I will say this again, and I want to make it very, very clear, African Americans, especially African American women, we did not ask your women to come into our culture and to start cosplaying us. We didn't ask for that. We didn't ask for white people to come in and start listening to our cultural music. Once again, you can blame the music industry for that. We didn't ask for that. We didn't want that. You know, we didn't want that ever to happen. We were perfectly okay with soul music staying in our community. We were perfectly okay with it. Never once have we ever wanted our music dispersed out to all races of people. But black men are not going to turn it down. They're opportunists. And I can't say I don't blame them, but we sure didn't want white women and Hispanic women coming into our communities, using our music as a means to seduce our men. We didn't ask for that either. So, you know, I think what needs to happen, really, I think what would make America a better place is if the black community went back to keeping our cultural music on private. In other words, we need to cater to our own people when it comes to our cultural music. Because as long as white people were listening to heavy metal and going to your own concerts, they weren't in our culture. They weren't coming to our concerts and trying to dress like us and walk like us and talk like us and act like us and cosplay us. And again, I have said this, you know, several times. This goes back to the music industry. This don't have anything to do with what we wanted as an African American people. So please understand that we did not want that. We didn't want our cultural music for everybody. That's not what was supposed to happen. In the 70s and in the 60s, we kept our cultural music within our own community. And the music industry kept it in the community. If you if you were lucky enough to get to listen to our cultural music, you just were able to do that. But the problem started with the music videos, when black men started putting all these other races into our music videos. And then that's when they started taking an interest in our men. Because, yeah, if you're singing love songs to other races of women, naturally they're going to take an interest in the music and in the culture. Yeah, if you're putting them in your videos. But notice they didn't make the white community do that. They just focused on the black community. They wanted the black community to be open to all races of people. No other community has ever been asked to do that. We don't, as a black community, we don't listen to Tejano music. I don't know a thing about Tejano music. I've heard it a few times. I don't go to none of the concerts. I don't know none of the artists. That's not my culture. So I don't listen to none of their stuff. But then again, none of the men are putting black women in their videos either. And the music industry isn't going into the Latino community pushing Latino men to open up their Tejano music to the whole world. And they're not doing that with white men either. They only do it to black people. So if there's a problem with if you have a problem with black culture, talk to the music industry. Talk to the leaders of the white community. Tell them to start putting out music that will attract their people back. Bring back rock. Do what you have to do. Take your women and make some music that your women are going to like. Put your own women in your videos and come up with your own dress code and your own dialect of English. Nobody told you guys, to come over to the black side and to adopt all our stuff. We didn't ask for that. So I think I've made my message very clear. This is not the fault of black American people. This has got everything to do with the music industry, Hollywood, black male rappers agreeing to share their cultural music with the whole world because they're opportunists. And again, I don't blame them for being that way, but it has really damaged our community. Because when we kept our cultural music to ourselves, we didn't have these problems. When white people stayed in their own communities and went to their own concerts, they listened to their own music, we didn't have none of these problems that we got going on with the culture today here in America. White people stayed in their own community, black people stayed in their community, and Hispanics stayed in their community. So whose fault is this? The music industry, Hollywood. Okay, and black men only agreed to do it because they're opportunists. And the reason why Hollywood did it was to split up the black family. That is the agenda, to split up the black family. Thanks so much for listening, and I will talk to you guys in another video. Thanks once again, and I will see you soon. Thank you.